Okay, we'll unmute him in just a second. So hello everybody, and welcome to MOD's Save Our Seas Distinguished Speaker Series. Thank you for joining us tonight as we keep bringing you virtual programming. It's nice to visit you all in your living rooms while we're not all at the museum still. We have a great program tonight. This is powered by the Save Our Seas Foundation, our Distinguished Speaker Series, which is going to be continuing the first Thursday of the month for the next couple of months at least. My name is Brady Newbill. I'm our Public Programs Coordinator at the Museum of Discovery and Science. Just a few things before we get started. We're going to keep everybody's microphones muted just to make room for our speaker, just so there's no extra noise or clutter in the background. There's a chance that you might be an interruption by my cat or something. There's not really much I can do about that. But we'll keep everybody's microphones muted. If you are able to keep your camera on, it would be nice to see an audience. It's only so fun to give a presentation to a bunch of screen names, but you're welcome to keep your anonymity as much as you want. In a few minutes, we'll be hearing from our special guests, and then at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat below, and we will remember them and get to them at the end, and we'll have a nice little moderated discussion. So feel free to, throughout the presentation, if you hear something you're interested in, just put that question in the chat, and yeah, and we'll get started. So tonight our special guest is Paul Clerkin. He is a research scientist currently working on his PhD at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, specializing in identifying and tagging new and rare species of deep sea chondrichthyans. Let me know if I got that right. Chondrichthyans are a class of marine vertebrate species that include sharks and rays. Over the course of his young career, Paul has discovered over a dozen new species of sharks in the deep waters of the Indian, Atlantic, and Pacific Oceans. He often utilizes innovative techniques like satellite tagging and video. He's actually produced several documentaries about sharks. And he's going to be sharing some of his methods, sharing some of his research and some stories tonight. So if we're all good to go, I guess I'll turn it over to you, Paul.
Cool. Thanks so much, Brady. Thanks for the introduction. Let me see how I can share my screen. Is that working? Is that good?
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm Paul Clerkin. Just starting my PhD here at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. Yeah, I'm excited to share some of this stuff with you. I'm always a nervous speaker, so I'm going to try not to speak too fast. And I just loaded this thing up with a bunch of video that I'm hoping to share. It's been kind of crashing a little bit. This is my laptop's about 10 years old now. So hopefully if I'm patient, it will make it the whole way through the presentation. So I like to study sharks, usually lesser known deep sea sharks. And let me see. Oh no, it's freezing on the first slide. I think maybe it's the combination of using a PowerPoint and my camera.
Yeah, it might be too much for those 2010 model laptops.
Oh no, yeah.
Okay, just bear with us, everybody. Just a slight technical
difficulty. Yeah, I was worried about this. I was like, just putting in all the video and pictures I could find, and it started kind of crashing, but I thought it would be all right.
Paul, can you, if not, email your presentation to either Brady or myself, and we can share it on our computers and just flip through it for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also trying to think. I might be able to switch. I have another lap. Oh, here we go. Maybe.
All right.
Will this go faster? Okay. It's got a little bit of a lag, but I think let's give it a shot.
It's okay. It'll help you with your pacing.
That's true. Yeah. All right. So when people think about sharks, a lot of the time they think about some of the popular species that we see, great white sharks, and they think a lot about what we see on TV, which is Jaws, and then also Sharknadoes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think they're working on 7. And they see sharks as kind of one species and usually dangerous. But my favorite thing about sharks is how diverse they are. You know, they come in different shapes and different sizes, all the way from the 40-foot whale shark to the 8-inch pygmy ghost shark or pygmy lantern shark. So sharks not only are very diverse, but they inhabit a diverse, have different environments. Of the over 1,200 chondrichthyans that we know of, about half of them are coastal. We get a couple in like the pelagic and freshwater areas, and then the other half is deep sea. So sharks really, they take up a lot of the deep sea. Of the chondrichthyans in the deep sea, about half of them are sharks. You have close to 40% of the batoids and almost all the ghost sharks. And with these deep sea species, we see a lot of cool deep water alien adaptations. The conservation of deep sea sharks is kind of complicated because they're not very well studied and they're not really encountered as often or not seen as often. There's not a lot of protection for them. A couple of years ago, a group of scientists did an assessment of all the IUCN, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, all of their ratings for animals, whether they're endangered, whether they're least concern. And they found out of sharks, about 24% are threatened, and about half of all known species are data deficient. And of those data deficient species, more than half were from the deep sea. So the deep sea is very poorly studied. There's a lot of cool stuff down there. And the deep sea makes up such a huge amount of our three-dimensional habitat. We think there's probably 70 to 90% of species in the deep sea are still unclassified, they're unknown, and it's a very data poor area. So I really wanted to study it, and it was kind of hard to get into studying the deep sea because you have to, this is from my master's degree and there's not a lot of money for master's research. So I started working with commercial fishers, and a lot of it is they have the ability to go out for long periods of time. They do very remote trips to, far off the coast. And they have the knowledge. They've been out there. They have mappings of the seamounts and areas. And it also made it possible to go to sea with these groups because, as you can imagine, to hire a 300-foot boat to go to sea for a couple of months with a crew would have cost a ton of money. I also work with local fishers, scale fishers, because they have a ton of local knowledge and they can find a lot of sharks that scientists tend to think of as impossible to locate. So by doing this, I've encountered a lot of different species, a lot of rare ones, a lot of deep sea species, some that are almost never seen, and the fishers see them all the time, but they're just not really reported to science. I've also seen a lot of really cool fish. This is a project I'm always meaning to get to, is the catch up with the fish stuff. The shark stuff just kind of takes priority, but I see a lot of weird fish and a lot of weird invertebrates. So by working with fishers and in different parts of the world, I've been kind of lucky to be able to work in the Pacific, the North to South, across the equator, in the North Pacific, off Taiwan, across the Atlantic, and the Southern Atlantic, and in large parts of the Indian Ocean. And that gave me some opportunities to work with the United Nations and FAO. So now I'm just going to talk about some of my favorite trips that I've been able to do working with deep sea sharks. And the first one is in the Atlantic, the southeastern Atlantic, off of Africa, from Cape Town up to Walvis Bay. And this was a trip with the United Nations in an effort to map some of the seamounts out there and see if they were going to be viable fishing grounds or if they had a lot of sensitive species like sharks and coral. So this was a really fun trip. You can see there I am up there. I'm like the only person smiling because this is my first time doing like drop camera trips and projects. So I was still very excited because we would just drop a camera down and we get to see kind of the bottom of the ocean. And by the end, I think we were all pretty tired of seeing the bottom of the ocean. We were doing 8 hours a day. So this is a lot of what we would see, coral, and we'd sit there with like a little thumb counter and we count every coral that we saw. We do the same thing for sharks and invertebrates. So we'd also do these grabs. You can see they would drop down this claw that would bring up sediment, and we just kind of count everything. We were also mapping the area, so you can see up here's all the high-tech mapping stuff, which I never touched. And this is how we did the drop cams. We had this large thing we called the cam pod, which was pretty much just a deep water camera on this big frame, and we would just kind of tow it off the boat and do our best not to get it stuck in any coral or rocks, and would report live video up to this room, and we would just kind of tally everything that we saw. So this is what most of the days at sea looked like, and we did this for 6 weeks. We'd just be kind of at sea and just seeing everything come up. I really like this remote right here because it looks like a really fun video game remote, but that's for operating the cam pod. And so this is what we came to see, what I came to see, like these deep sea sharks. We'd see a couple here and there. This is a cat shark, probably a Halolurus species, and then this is a lantern shark. And this was probably the most common shark that we saw down there. And as their name implies, lantern sharks can actually generate light, and they do this along their bellies, which they use for counter illumination to help them blend in with the ambient light. So if a predator is looking up, they can't see their silhouette. And they also have photo markings on their side, which help them communicate when they school, and along their spines, which we believe is just to warn predators that they are armed and dangerous. We also saw this. This is a false cat shark, and this is probably, I think I estimated it to be about 8 feet long. And this is the first record in the southeastern Atlantic. And so this was actually, we put this into the guide that the FAO was making. These guys are really interesting. They're one of my favorite species. They get large. They get about 10 feet long. And they also they have really small teeth, the size of grains of sand, and they are in utero cannibalistic. So the pups eat each other inside their mother, and because they do that, there's only one pup born per uterus, and when they're born, they're usually pretty large. So this is a specimen that I saw in the Indian Ocean, and you can see it was a large baby. I think it was 1.24 meters long when it was born, so it was pretty big, and it was really crammed up in there. You can see his nose is all bent up because he ate all his brothers and sisters. I did a project in the Pacific. This is probably about 4 years ago with pelagic sharks, and we were studying some of the fin trade that they have out there. Our project became kind of complicated because the local mafia kind of started trying to shut down our operation. This is right here. We went to the boat to go to sea, and there's this guy waiting on board, and he just said the captain didn't feel like fishing today, and he was trying to get us to pay him off. So what we wound up doing is we just switched docks. We overnight we drove way far south. We hopped on the boat, and we actually hid in with the nets, and we did that until we got to sea. And once we got to sea, and we were clear of the local mafia, were able to fish. And this was on a mahi-mahi long line, and they were out there fishing for mahi-mahi, and they would catch sharks by accident, and they let us tag along and catch and release these sharks and tag them. So this is a scalloped hammerhead that they got, and this was, I don't know, maybe a 5-foot shark, and she was just tremendously strong. They didn't have the ability to bring the sharks on the boat without damaging them, because they would usually just gaff animals with a hook and bring them on board. So I actually had to grab it and take the hook out, and I wasn't really ready for how strong this animal was. I would grab her and flip her and try to, keep control of her so I could take out the hook, but this took quite a couple of tries. She was just so strong, I couldn't keep her still. And then after a little while, they got a large big eye thresher, and this is what we were there to tag. So once they came up, I hopped in the water. And the shark was on a gangin. I was able to grab it and flip it relatively easy, and then we were able to tag it and release it. So this is a pop-off satellite tag that we had. There you just goes into the basal cartilage of the first dorsal fin, and we popped out the hook. There we go. And then, yeah, swam with the shark a little bit to get it swimming, get it responsive. And then we let it go. So this one swam off. It had a short-term tag, but from what we saw from the tag, it swam south. It seemed to live along the ridges. And then that goes into my next project in the Indian Ocean, and this is one of my favorite projects. And this was actually a Save Our Seas sponsored project. that I started doing, I think, in 2012. And then the last time I went was 2000 and maybe 13 or 14, and I'm hoping to go again soon. But this is in the Indian Ocean on a deep sea fishing vessel. This was a 75-meter ship, and they're out there fishing for Alfonsino, which they called redfish, and orange roughy. They were a deep sea trawler, and they were a catcher processor. So they were 24 hours just catching and processing fish. And they let me just tag along to catalog their sharks that they caught as bycatch. So this is right in the Indian Ocean. As you can see, it's pretty large. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and the ship berthed from Mauritius, which is a beautiful little island. They do a lot of tourism for honeymooners, and I got to see it during the taxi ride from the airport to the ship, which is my home for the next 2 months. The ship fished along these deep sea seamounts, and it took us about, I think, 5 days of steaming to get there. We're about 1,000 miles away from anything, which, if you think about it, is interesting because it means the closest human beings were in the International Space Station when they went over in orbit. So that was the next closest group of people. The weather wasn't always good. Sometimes we'd have these large kind of squalls. I remember there were a few times where I would definitely check my life vest to make sure all my safety gear was ready to go, but the fishers seemed to be pretty used to it. And this would be about a regular day. It was a little bit bumpy out there, but not too bad. There's always a little bit of chop, but yeah, pretty overall, not too bad. They had a weird way of fishing. They kind of would just, they would go over a seamount and they would drop the nets overboard and let them sink down. And they would sink, at maybe 1 or 2 miles per hour, and the fish would be able to outswim that. So they would just kind of continuously swim away from the nets. But then at a certain point, there was a thermocline where there's a sharp change in the temperature of the water, and the fish didn't want to cross it. So they would swim back into the nets, and that's when they would scoop up everything and collect all the fish. So this is a kind of a normal catch for them. This is all Alfonsino. You can see why they call them redfish. And this is what they wanted to see. This is what we want to see. This is a nice clean catch where there's only their target catch. This is what we call a dirty catch, and there's a lot of bycatch. You can see there's the orange roughy in here, but there's also these gray spiny dory, and these little kind of brown wiggles are sharks, and that's what I was out there for. So I'd collect the bycatch. I also saw a lot of weird fish. We'd see these guys with like all these photophores and lights on their bellies, these weird angler fish, whatever this is with the teeth, and these, I call these Dr. Seuss fish. And I actually showed a bunch of these to some of my friends who are, they're ichthyologists. They study bony fish, and they told me they're all new species. They asked what I did with the specimens, and I told them I didn't keep any of them. So the last time I went, I started keeping them, and I hope to go again and collect some bony fish for them. So we saw a lot of sharks while we were there. I'm just going to go over a couple of my favorites to share with you guys. And this is a species called kitefin shark. They have, kind of kite-like fins. One of the interesting things when you read their description is that they have large fleshy lips, and that's kind of hard to imagine on a shark. But when you see them, they do have like these fatty kind of kissy lips. And the reason that they have large lips is they seem to feed like a cookie cutter, where they go up and they create suction on a larger animal like a whale or a seal, and they'll take out a scoop. So they actually have these large kind of blade-like teeth, and I found some mammal meat in their stomach, so they seem to be eating some kind of mammal out there. And that technically makes them a parasite, if you think about it. They're a large shark parasite. So this is one of the ones that we got out there. This one came up alive. If the sharks came up and the net's alive, I would do my best to get water running over their gills and get them back in the water. But you can see they're kind of large, they're torpedo shaped, they have those large sphericals to pump water over their gills. And their faces, I mean, they look kind of like puppets. They have very forward-facing eyes, they're probably visual predators, and they have those fleshy lips. So they're kind of a strange looking shark. So this one we were able to release overboard, and hopefully it survived. This is a species that we encountered. This is a new species of sleeper shark. I think it's interesting because it's actually very small. It was only about that big, and we only had the one specimen. So of this species, this is the only known specimen, which we have not yet named. It's still waiting to be described. We actually got a lot of new species. Everything on this table is a new species, and they came up in the same net. We have 2 species of these Bithyluris cat sharks. This is a Apersturus, a demon cat shark. This is a different species. These guys are one species, and this is a different species. So during our time out there, we probably discovered over a dozen new species, but it's a little bit hard to say because it gets complicated with the genetics. There's some species that look pretty different, and they're consistently different, but the genetics come out similar. And there's other species where the genetics come out different, but they look exactly the same. So it's all a little bit of a mess. We're still kind of sorting it out. And this is a video of that deep sea Bithyluris shark that a colleague actually sent to me. They were doing drop camera work out there. So this one is one of my favorites. I call it QDI because I think they have such cute little scrunched up snouts. But you can see it's almost neutrally buoyant in the water column. They have very large kind of water balloon-like bodies with the large livers, and that helps them float. And they probably can conserve a lot of energy. Even though I think they're really adorable and they're mature at only about a foot long, we just don't know a lot about the ecology of these seamounts. This could be the biggest, baddest predator down there on that particular seamount. And then we also got some ghost sharks. So this is a ghost shark that was actually a new species that I named after the ship. It's Chimera wilwachii. And this is one of my favorites. We encountered probably 50 of these, but every ghost shark species that we encountered was a new species. There's very little known about ghost sharks from the area. And yeah, we got 4 different species, 3 chimeras and 1 hydrolagus. Those are the different genuses. And we've described the 3 chimeras and still working on the hydrolagus. So this is a ghost shark. This isn't one of the new species, but as you can see, they kind of get their name. Everybody asks if they get their name because of kind of the spooky appearance and ghostly way that they swim. Kind of haunting. So I really hope to go back to the Indian Ocean soon. It is one of my favorite projects. There's so much that we don't know about the area. I have funding from Save Our Seas to go again. I was supposed to go earlier this year, but that didn't happen with COVID. But I'm hoping to go back, look for new species, and do some more high-tech investigation with genetics and maybe some drop cams and tags. And there's also the potential to start some management for these species. My next project and this one I did recently. This was earlier this year. Was in Alaska. I was looking for Pacific sleeper sharks, and there's not a lot known about these sharks. We know that they get large, and they have kind of this knife and fork dentition, and we call it a knife and fork dentition because the top teeth are kind of prong-like and the bottom teeth are kind of blade-like, and so they can hold their prey in place with the top teeth and kind of shake their head or roll and cut through it with the bottom teeth. And because of that, they can eat a whole lot of different species. They have been found with just about everything in their stomachs, from kelp to horses to jellyfish to seals, dogs, and just about everything. And so, oh, this is one of the large pictures. But because of that, we don't know if they, if they're eating seals, if they can catch them, which seems almost impossible because they're a large kind of lethargic fish. That's how they get their name, sleeper shark. So we went out there with some kind of high-tech toys. We had some drop cams, some camera tags, and a little ROV to see if we could bring in one of these sleeper sharks and see how it fed. They're seen around the world, but most commonly and most close to the surface when you go up north. So we went to Prince William Sound in Alaska, and we just started dropping these cameras. So this is we'd have kind of just this bait out on this arm, and then we had these cameras on this this aluminum welded frame. Oh, sorry, I went too far. Okay, here we go. So it was always really clumsy to drop it off like this. because we just didn't have a great way to drop it or retrieve it from the boat. But we had these cameras and lights, and they were rated to go, I forget, something like 2,500 meters deep. So we're dropping these at about 500 feet. So it was well within their range. So we just drop it like that. And this is sped up, I think, 3 times. But you can really see once you get to the bottom, you're in a deep, dark environment. There's no longer sunlight, so a lot of the rules are different in the deep sea. Right. Yeah. So once you get down about whatever this is, probably 400 feet, it's pretty much just dark. So we let them soak for the length of the camera batteries between 2 to 5 hours, and we started getting some shots like this where the sharks coming in, and they would bump the bait. But so it was a little bit strange. They would come in pretty often, but they had trouble finding the bait, which makes me think maybe they're relying more on their electromagnetic sensors, or they're really scavenging off the ground, and the bait was a little, hanging off the bottom a little bit. Yeah, so here's one coming in, and they seem just kind of a little bit clumsy. You can see this is a large one. But yeah, they really seem to have trouble finding the bait, and they do seem kind of lethargic. There are some reports of them, being predators, or even accounts of them ambush, preying like a crocodile on reindeer, but it doesn't really seem probable for this species. And we also, while we're out there, sorry, these clips are a little bit dramatic. When we're out there, we were able to put on a camera tag on this shark too, so we could see how they behaved at the bait when they were feeding, and we could also see how they behaved when they're just free swimming. So we got the shark, we pulled it alongside the boat. We were able to secure it and put the tag on. These guys were interesting because they had really like thorn-like denticles. They were very sharp, but they were also kind of slimy. So it was interesting. You had to really hold on to them tight, which was a little bit difficult with the thorns. So we're able to slide on this camera tag. These things had a timed release, so it would just pop off and float to the surface, and we would go around in the boat with a little antenna and try to locate them, and that's how we were able to recover them. So this is video from the camera tag, and this is sped up, I think 1,200%, because it was on the shark for about 4 hours. But you can see it actually, it didn't go straight down like we thought it would dive to the bottom. They just seemed to really kind of cruise. Towards the end, she started kind of going towards the bottom, but she would just kind of cruise up and down in the water column. And so it was interesting because she would even power on the way down, which means she was expending energy to sink. So we don't know if that has to do with like how they look for food or if it's part of their scavenging. So for this, we're still actually pretty early in trying to figure out what we can publish, but we're hoping to have some information that we can share. Okay, then I'm going to go on to my last and one of my favorite projects, which is the Megamouth project. So Megamouths, oh no, let me see. I think I skipped one, sorry. Megamouths are, they're interesting because they're a relatively new species. They were only discovered in 1976. Which is interesting if you think about it, because they're such a large shark, and they seem to be found in most of the world's temperate waters. So the fact that such a large shark went undiscovered for so long is really interesting. They're found in most around the world, temperate waters. They've been seen, there's different reports. People say around 60 times. It's probably, we've accepted that it's probably over 100 times, and there's some reports that it's over 200 times, but that's still not very often for such a large species. They're considered ultra rare. They're filter feeders, like whale sharks or basking sharks, but they are very flabby, and they don't seem to be able to swim with their mouths constantly open like a basking shark, and they don't seem to be able to do the large suction gulps that a whale shark can do. So it's a little bit of a mystery how they can maintain enough calories to get as big as they do. They've been reported up to 18 feet long, although we believe they get larger. and they're a very unique species. When they were described, they actually had to create a new genus for the species and a new family for the species. And they found parasites on the specimen, and they had to create new species, genus, and families for the parasites as well. So they're very different from anything that we had encountered before. So this project is in Taiwan, and really what happened was one of my friends was reporting that they were seeing megamouths in the fish market. So I kind of just hopped over there. I didn't have much of a plan, but we started just talking around, asking boat captains, about this specimen, if they're landing megamouths, and eventually we found a captain who said he can get us a megamouth, and I said, can you promise me one? And he said yes. So they're out there fishing, and oh, sorry, this slide came before. So this is when we're working with the fishers. You can see they get a lot of weird fish. This guy down here is called a jelly nose. I don't know much about them except for that there is not a lot known about them. And they would also catch and eat sharks. So for this, we had some deep sea tags with us that we were planning to put on the sharks when we encountered them. And these would collect a suite of data: temperature, depth, salinity, all that stuff every 4 seconds. And then once it hit a program time, it would pop off, transmit that to a satellite, and that would get sent to my laptop. We also had a little ROV, which we were going to use to film the shark while I was swimming. This is my dad trying to drive it, and that's why it's only going forwards and backwards. So this is one of the ships we worked on, and you can see they're out steaming around midnight, and they would just throw out these floats with a length of rope on them, and that would drag out this big mesh net, and they use these to fish for ocean sunfish. So it would they would steam the boat forward, and that would kind of just pull the net out the back, and then they would just let them soak. We'd wait from sunset to sunrise, and that meant there was nothing to do but like try to sleep on the boat, which was not that easy. And then right before the sunrise, they would start pulling in the nets, and you can see they just pull it in over the side like this, and we just all look over the side and wait and watch the nets. And it was actually the first night that we were out there that there's a large commotion. Everyone was yelling, and they had a large megamouth. So I hopped in the water, and it was exciting because it was dark. It was a commercial fishing vessel. It was offshore, and it was dark, and I kind of even didn't really think about that I had to get in the water when it was at night or anything, until I had to actually jump in. And as soon as the bubbles cleared my mask, I look up, and there is just this huge shark kind of looking back at me. We were able to tag the shark. That's the first thing we did, was we wanted to get the tag on. So we took this. We had a dermal anchor, which we put in right in the basal cartilage of the shark. And that's like that. And then just you pull out the applicator, and it stays in. And then we took a suite of other data. We took total length, dorsal fin length, caudal fin length. We collected a lot of parasites. They had parasites kind of all over their mouths and gills. We took just basic sex, length, maturity stuff from the shark, and we took genetics. So after that, we just we released the shark, and I swam with it for a little bit to make sure that it was responsive and that it was going to be able to swim on its own. But it actually did not seem too stressed out by the whole ordeal. My theory is that they're so they just don't struggle that hard, so they don't get exhausted or stressed out. But they seem really healthy, and it just doesn't seem to stress them out too much to get caught and tagged. So during this project, we were able to put out tags on 3 individuals. We had a 4-month tag on a 22-foot female, which might be the largest reported megamouth specimen. We put 2 tags on a single male that was 15 foot long, and then we put 1 tag out on a 19-foot female, and that was an 18-month tag. And since this time, they've all popped off and they've all transmitted data back to me. So I'm in the process of trying to decode that data and map it up with ecological factors so we can figure out where these sharks go and why. I think a lot of this is important because megamouths are currently listed as least concern. You can see down here when you look at you know, recovery plans, monitoring plans, everything. There's pretty much nothing in place to protect them, and there's nothing. No one's really trying to put anything in place to protect them because they're believed to be so rare. I believe it's the IUCN. They even say if they're, you know, if they were encountered by humans, you know, they would have to manage them. But since they're so rare, they don't have to worry about it. But there did seem to be the presence of these sharks in the marketplace, and a lot of the time, I believe they're reported. But I would ask around. Even the shark auctioneers didn't know where they wound up going. So I kept asking. Fishers and restaurateurs and everyone, and they wind up putting it into a soup. They call it, you know, deep sea shark or tofu shark, and they say it's really good. I asked them what it tastes like, and they told me it tastes like goblin shark, which I don't know what that tastes like. And I asked them what that tastes like, and they told me it tastes like whale shark, and I don't know that one either. So then they finally told me it tastes like tofu, and that's why they call it tofu shark. But there are some recent regulations. I think just maybe a month or two ago, Taiwan announced a complete ban on landing megamouths, whale sharks, and white sharks. And they're putting together, they're trying to put together a program to research these sharks. So I'm talking to them, hopefully, to be involved and collected a lot of data and maybe put enough information together to where we can manage these sharks, not only for Taiwan, but for other locations. Yeah, so with that, that's one of the projects that we have ongoing. I'm hoping to go back. I also have a megamouth specimen at the Smithsonian, which was found in the marketplace, and we're hoping to dissect as soon as COVID allows us. But they're pretty uncommon to have a fresh, you know, unpreserved specimen. It's just frozen. So we're hoping to really get as much information as we can. And between that, the tags, and the project in Taiwan, we're hoping that this very poorly known shark will pretty soon have enough information to at least make decisions about its life history and management. So that's pretty much my talk. Any takeaways? I would like just pretty much you to think about how diverse sharks are. They're all around the planet, you know, even in freshwater, deep sea. And they're top predators in nearly all of those environments. So while they're really important, most species are not protected. You know, almost none of the deep sea sharks are really protected. And a lot of the time it's because people think that we just can't get the information on them. They're too rare or they're too remote. But, you know, you can find these sharks, especially if you team up with local fishers, and you can study them, and you can put together enough information to make decisions to create policy to protect these species. I think it just it's there, it's available. It just requires a lot of cooperation between researchers, policymakers, and local fishers. So with that, I think that's my last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Wow. Well, there was a lot of fascinating information and imagery coming through on that one. I don't, maybe not least of which that goblin sharks and whale sharks apparently taste like tofu. So,
yeah, well, now you know.
One of the many things I'm going to be thinking about from this for a while. A lot of those species, it's hard to think that they even live on the same planet as us. I know it's one kind of little trivia point that I'm not even sure where I picked it up, and I'm not even entirely sure how true it is at this point, but I always remember hearing that we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of the ocean, or species that live in the bottom of the ocean. And so this just really brought that home, that there was just like so many bizarre species of sharks that I've never heard of before, and that nobody knew existed until you got there. Can I just ask like maybe a basic question of what led you to get into this type of research? Because this is almost like extreme sports status of fisheries research.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I've been interested in sharks and marine biology and all that stuff from an early age. And so when I started, even during my undergrad, I wanted to study sharks. And so when I started my master's, I was trying to find ways to study sharks. And then there was an opportunity with the fishing vessel in the Indian Ocean, and that was the Will Watch. And they just let me go study sharks. And, I actually, early on in my career, I didn't, realize there were so many different species and how diverse. And I didn't, when I started, I didn't realize there were so many unknown species of sharks. I kind of thought all the species were cataloged in a book somewhere, and we knew about them. And, and I thought the research was mostly tagging or something. But the fact that, in this day and age, where we have cell phones, which are pretty much supercomputers in our pockets that like talk to satellites in space and all this stuff. The fact that we have so much of our planet which is unexplored, and so many species that we've just never seen. And further than that, the fishers see them. They're just not scientists, so they don't report them. Anyway, so I don't think that answered your question, but when I started doing,
I mean, it kind of did, because I mean,
yeah.
just talking about how you open up to that. I'm like, that's a great point, that fishermen would find these species, but not even know that they're doing scientific research, because again, you just assume that like most species of sharks or big megafauna like that, you would almost assume have been categorized already. So it's kind of humbling to know that you can't just look that up. You still got to like get in and get some remote submarines and get in the water with and tagging some very bizarre, strange looking things to even answer basic questions like how many species of shark are there. So we got some good questions coming into the chat. Let me just relay a few of these to you. First question coming from JJ Frank. Have you ever worked in Mauritius? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Mauritius? Is it any chance it's Mauritius or Mauritius?
It might be Mauritius. Yeah, I might be reading that wrong. I'm not familiar with what that is.
Okay, well, if it's Mauritius, then the answer is no. I'm not. I haven't worked there. But if it's Mauritius, then yes, I've worked there a couple of times. I've worked there for the FAO and the UN for some workshops out there, and also when I go to the Indian Ocean, that's where the ship lands. So we come and go from Mauritius, and then if we have specimens or samples, we usually work them up at the local research station. So I've spent a couple of months there, and yeah, I love it there. I'm also working on some larger, hopefully ongoing projects there, but it's just been very slow to develop.
Yeah, and I am getting confirmation that, yeah, that is Mauritius.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just pronouncing it wrong even now. So sorry about that. Next question from Taylor. Have you ever done research on the megalodon?
I have not done any research on megalodons. They most of the research going on with them right now is based off their teeth, because that's what winds up fossilizing, because sharks are cartilaginous, so they don't have bones. They don't have true bones. They have, a spinal column and jaws and everything. But mostly people study their teeth. And I think even though megalodons are cool, I'm not really, an expert in teeth morphology. So I've never studied them.
Sure. And just a side note to that, you don't have to go into the middle of the ocean to find megalodon fossils because of fluctuations in sea levels, and Florida's position in that. You can actually, a lot of megalodon fossils have been found in the middle of the state of Florida. That's something you can learn at the Museum of Discovery and Science sometime. Next question from Andy. Is there any risk of what's the risk of you being eaten during doing some of this research, or what's the danger there?
Being eaten, probably not so much. I think if there's I think at most a bite, but I think it's pretty safe. I mean, I think some of the shots look dramatic, which is cool. It makes me look cool. But for the most part, like I don't really do anything that I think would be out of control. Yeah, it's all, I think, pretty well managed. Especially the Megamouth stuff, it's really fun. It's a large shark, but absolutely the most danger comes from just being on a commercial boat at night. As for the shark, I think there's very little danger.
Okay, great. And a couple people have asked a similar question, both Danny and Sandy. who gets to name new species of sharks? And when you find a new species of shark specimen, do you get to keep the specimen?
Ah, so yeah, that's that one's more disappointing because you get to name the shark. If you describe it, you get to name it. So a lot of the time, if a species is found by like a fisher or someone, they don't really know it's new. So they give it to a researcher, and the person who describes it and publishes it, they get to name it, which is cool. Everybody asks if you can name it after yourself, and the answer is no. That's really the only rule that they have, is that you're not supposed to name it after yourself. So otherwise, everyone just have like just name every shark after themselves. So that's pretty much the only rule. There's a lot of funny stories about funny names out there that they've done for sharks or other fish. Yeah, there's a lot of funny names, but you don't get to keep it because you have to be able to put it into a collection that everybody has access to. And that's just a way for other researchers to be able to study it and also verify that it is its own species. Otherwise, who knows, you can make up a species and just not let people see it, and it might be fake.
Yeah, I promise I found something you've never seen before. And also, just a good point about, like, you discover a new species, and that's not the end of the research on that species. There's other specialists that are going to go in and not just identify the new species, but learn more about the species, its diets, its behaviors, its habitats. A couple more questions in here. First one from Jeffrey. How are you treated by the fishing crews, and what was your relationship like with the crews of the boats you were on?
Okay. Hey, Jeff. For the most part, I am treated well. I've worked in a lot of different fisheries, and I really like it. I like working with the people that are regularly at sea encountering these sharks. I have been fortunate to have good relationships with the fishers. They're usually very accommodating. They usually sometimes they go out of the way, and they lose the potential to catch fish to help me do a project to drop a camera or release a shark. That kite fin that I was putting the hose in its mouth, they actually stopped operation to let me go down the back of the ramp to release a shark. So yeah, I've been fortunate to have a very good relationship with fishers, which I think is important because there's so much friction between fishers, scientists, and politicians. I remember during my undergrad, I was kind of told, these three groups are always fighting. And I, at the time, I kind of just, I learned it and I believed it. But when I work with the fishers, I think they are interested in, the health of the ocean. They are interested in maintaining their fishery, and whether that's altruistic or not, I think they have at least an interest in fish, and they want to be able to keep catching fish. So I've been lucky to have a good relationship with fishers.
Great, and looks like we got one more question. This is from Megan, and she says, I'm new to careers in relating to marine life. Is there a specific job or career path you know of where one can help injured sharks, dolphins, or rays and then release them back into the wild?
Okay, that's a good question. There are groups that take that try to take care of stranded animals. A lot of the time, I don't think they do that for sharks so much. It's usually marine mammals. The groups that I know that do this, they are usually grad students at a lab. They usually have a number that people can call if they see a stranded whale or another mammal that's in trouble. You don't see it so much for sharks, and I don't know if there's if that's a career or something that just grad students wind up doing. Yeah, I don't know. I would actually, if you wanted to get into for marine mammals, I'd probably contact a lab and see if they let you volunteer.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. I guess we're just about out of time here. So I just want to say thank you to Paul for presenting such frankly bizarre and fascinating research. And we look forward to kind of tracking your career where it goes. That was really incredible. And thank you to the Save Our Seas Foundation for making this all possible. And Make sure to tune in. We'll be doing this the first Thursday of the month, the next couple of months. The next event is October 1st. We'll be having a panel discussion on sea turtle conservation in South Florida, which is an issue very near and dear to many of our hearts at Mods. So make sure you go to mods.org and RSVP for that event and tune in for that. Until then, thank you to Paul and thank you all for tuning in tonight. I'm Brady Newbill from the Museum of Discovery and Science, and we will see you again next time. Good night.